They refused to let her fly the Apache until a single worn patch stopped a full-bird colonel mid-sentence and turned an entire flight line silent. "Ma'am, step away from the aircraft." The voice was crisp, controlled, and just loud enough to carry over the steady whine of turbines spooling in the background. Chief Warrant Officer Jake Mercer stood planted on the painted line of the hangar deck, one hand resting casually on the matte gray fuselage of the H-64 Apache, as if it belonged to him personally. He was tall, composed, and carried the kind of confidence that came from never having been seriously challenged. His flight suit was immaculate, sleeves rolled with knife-edge precision, his name tape perfectly aligned. Behind him, 2 junior lieutenants lingered near a tool cart, their posture loose, their attention fixed on the woman approaching like they had just been handed unexpected entertainment. She didn't look like she belonged there. That was the first thing Mercer noticed. No flight suit, no rank, no visible insignia, just a plain dark t-shirt, faded jeans, and a weathered leather jacket slung over one shoulder. Her hair was tied back in a low, practical knot, not styled, not trying to impress. In her hand, she carried a helmet bag, old, scuffed, and clearly used, but that detail barely registered to him. To Mercer, she was a mismatch. A civilian. Maybe a contractor who'd wandered too far past her clearance zone. Maybe someone who didn't understand where she was. The kind of problem you corrected quickly and moved on from. "You're in a restricted area," he continued, stepping forward just enough to block her path completely. His tone wasn't hostile yet, but it was firm, rehearsed. The voice of someone who had enforced this rule 100 times before and expected immediate compliance. Around them, the hangar pulsed with controlled chaos. Ground crews moved with purpose, fuel lines snaked across the concrete, and the distant chop of rotor blades cut through the air in rhythmic bursts. But slowly, subtly, a few heads began to turn. Something about the stillness of the woman, the way she didn't immediately apologize or step back, created a ripple. She stopped a few feet from him, close enough to see the faint scuff marks on his boots, close enough to meet his eyes without raising her voice. "I'm here for the 1400 flight," she said. Calm. Even. No hesitation. Mercer blinked once, then let out a short breath through his nose. Not quite a laugh, but close. The lieutenants behind him exchanged a glance, the corner of one mouth twitching upward. "The 1400 flight," Mercer repeated, tilting his head slightly as if testing the words for flaws. "And what exactly is your role in that, ma'am?" There was a pause, not from uncertainty, but from restraint. "I'm flying it," she replied. That did it. The tension snapped, replaced instantly by a low, amused chuckle from the lieutenants. One of them looked down, shaking his head like he'd just heard a good joke. Mercer's expression shifted, not to anger, but to something colder, irritation sharpened by disbelief. "Right," he said slowly. "Of course you are." He took another step forward, closing the distance just enough to assert control over the space. "Let's not waste each other's time," he added, voice tightening. "There's no pilot listed on today's manifest matching your description. There's no visiting officer scheduled for this slot. And you're not wearing a uniform." His gaze moved deliberately over her again, cataloging every detail like evidence. "So either you're confused," he continued, "or you're somewhere you're not supposed to be." She didn't react to the tone, didn't rise to it, didn't defend herself the way most people would when confronted like this in front of an audience. Instead, she shifted the helmet bag slightly in her hand and glanced past him, not dismissively, but with quiet awareness, taking in the aircraft, the crew movements, the environment. It was the kind of glance that lasted less than a second, but it wasn't the glance of someone out of place. Mercer noticed it. He didn't understand it, but he noticed. "You're making a mistake," she said. Still calm, still level. That was the moment his patience thinned. Because it wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. No fear, no defensiveness, no attempt to explain herself in a way that fit his expectations. Just a statement. Flat and certain. Behind him, one of the lieutenants shifted his weight, the earlier amusement fading into something more cautious, but Mercer didn't see it. He was locked in now. "No," he replied, his voice dropping slightly, gaining edge. "The mistake would be letting you get anywhere near this aircraft without proper authorization." He gestured toward the Apache with a small, dismissive flick of his hand. "This isn't a museum piece, ma'am. It's a live combat platform, and you don't just walk up to it because you feel like it. A few more people had slowed nearby, not enough to make it obvious, but enough that the air felt different, tighter, more focused. Public enough now that backing down would feel like losing ground. I suggest you turn around, Mercer continued. Head back to the administrative area and find whoever you're supposed to be meeting. Another pause. This one longer. The woman looked at him. Really looked this time. Not at his rank, not at his uniform, but at him. There was something in her expression then. Not anger. Not even frustration. Something older. Tired, maybe. Like she had seen this moment play out before, in different places, with different faces, but always the same outcome. I'm not here by mistake, she said quietly. The words landed heavier than they should have. Mercer felt it. A flicker of something he couldn't name, and immediately pushed it aside. He straightened slightly, shoulders tightening, authority snapping back into place. That's enough, he said. I'm going to need to see some identification. She didn't move. My ID's in my jacket, she replied. Mercer glanced at the worn leather slum over her shoulder, then back at her. Then let's see it. Another still moment. Then, slowly, she shifted the jacket off her shoulder. Not rushed, not hesitant, just deliberate. But before she could hand it over, Mercer stepped forward and reached out, his hand closing firmly around her forearm. Not aggressive, but controlling, the kind of grip used to guide someone out of a restricted space. Actually, he said, voice firm now, final. We're going to walk over to base security and sort this out properly. The movement caused the jacket to slip from her grasp. It fell between them, hitting the concrete with a soft, heavy thud. Neither of them looked down immediately, but someone else did. And in that single unnoticed moment, the entire situation began to shift. The patch was the only thing that mattered now. A small, worn piece of fabric lying on the cold concrete that somehow carried more weight than the rank standing over it. For a moment, no one spoke. The hum of the hangar dulled just enough for the silence to feel heavy. One of the lieutenants noticed first. His eyes dropped, then widened. Sir, he muttered, not moving. Mercer didn't look. His grip was still firm on her arm. What is it, Lieutenant? He said, irritation still in his voice. The lieutenant hesitated. Sir, you need to see this. Something in his tone finally pulled Mercer's attention downward. At first glance, it looked like nothing, just a faded patch, worn thread, no official insignia. But then the details came into focus. A low Apache silhouette cutting across a burning ridge. Rotors blurred. Aggressive. Intentional. Beneath it, stitched in black, Gun 6. And below that, barely legible, Task Force Raptor, Kandahar. The lieutenant shifted back slightly. That's not something you just wear, he whispered. Mercer's grip loosened without him realizing it. What is it? He asked again, quieter now. The woman bent, picked up the jacket, and brushed it off like it didn't matter. It's old, she said. The answer was simple, too simple. No explanation, no defense, just fact. Across the hangar, Staff Sergeant Ramirez had gone completely still. He'd seen that patch before, not up close, but in a briefing file tied to a mission people didn't talk about openly. Task Force Raptor. Kandahar. A call sign that came with it. Gun 6. His stomach dropped. He looked at her again. The posture, the calm, the way she carried herself like someone who didn't need to prove anything. This wasn't a civilian mistake. This was something else entirely. He turned immediately, already pulling out his phone, moving fast. Back at the aircraft, Mercer finally released her arm. Slowly, carefully, like he wasn't ready to admit why. Where did you get that patch? He asked. Not accusing, not confident, just asking. She slipped the jacket back over her shoulder. It was given to me, she replied. That landed harder than anything else. One of the lieutenants shifted. Sir, maybe we should hold position, Mercer said, though the authority in his voice had thinned. Around them, the hangar had changed. People were watching now. Not openly, but enough. Conversation slowed. Movements paused. The energy had shifted from casual to something tighter, expectant. The woman adjusted her helmet bag and glanced toward the Apache again. You're still in my way, she said quietly. Mercer didn't answer right away. For the first time, he wasn't sure what the next move was. Until I confirm who you are, he said finally. You're not going near that aircraft. It sounded firm, but it didn't feel the same. Not anymore. Across the hangar, Ramirez was already on the phone, voice low and urgent. He wasn't calling security. He was calling someone who needed to know, fast. Back near the Apache, the woman stood calm, the patch now hidden again. But it didn't matter, because now everything had shifted. The question wasn't who she was. It was who they had just mistaken her for. And somewhere nearby, that answer was already on its way. The answer didn't arrive with noise, it arrived with presence. The black command vehicle rolled onto the flight line without lights or sirens, yet everything seemed to slow around it. Conversations died mid-sentence. Movement stalled. Even the distant rotor wash felt quieter somehow. The door opened, and the colonel stepped out, his expression already set, not confused, not curious, but certain. He scanned once, locked onto her instantly, and started walking. He didn't acknowledge Mercer, didn't ask for a report, didn't break stride. The space around them parted without a word. Mercer felt it before he understood it. That subtle shift when authority higher than yours enters the room. He straightened instinctively, his pulse climbing, his mind racing to reframe the situation into something explainable. But the colonel didn't stop for him. He stopped in front of her, exactly 3 feet away, and for one long second, no one moved. Then the colonel snapped to attention and rendered a sharp, flawless salute. "Ma'am," he said, voice steady, carrying across the silent hangar. "It's an honor." The words hit harder than any shout. Mercer felt the ground tilt beneath him. The lieutenants froze. Even the crew chiefs stood rigid. She returned the salute with calm precision, like it was second nature. "Colonel," she replied simply. No pride, no display, just acknowledgement. The colonel lowered his hand and turned, slowly, toward Mercer. The air tightened. "Do you know who you just put your hands on?" he asked. Mercer opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The colonel didn't wait. "This is the pilot who kept an Apache airborne after catastrophic hydraulic failure over Kandahar," he said, each word measured. "She held that aircraft in the fight, covered 2 ground units under fire, and refused to disengage until every man was extracted." A pause. Heavy. Final. "They call her Gun 6. Silence flooded the hangar. Mercer stepped back without meaning to. "I didn't know, sir," he started. "That," the colonel cut in quietly, "is exactly the problem. No anger, just truth." And somehow that was worse. He let the moment sit, then stepped aside, turning back to her, his tone shifting instantly. "The aircraft is yours, ma'am. As always." She gave a small nod, picked up her helmet bag, and walked past Mercer without hesitation. As she reached the Apache, she paused just slightly, not turning, just enough for her voice to carry. "Next time," she said calmly, "look closer." Then she climbed into the cockpit. No one moved. No one spoke. And as the engine began to whine to life, the lesson settled over the entire flight line. Not loud, not dramatic, but permanent. Because sometimes the uniform isn't visible, but the weight behind it always is.